This streaming content is made available by 5-Day Deal in conjunction with our partners for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this content is prohibited.
Hey guys, it's Shannon. Today we're going to be doing this outdoor edit from a trip that I took to Texas at one point. So this was obviously done outside. It's all natural light. So we had some hot spots coming in from the sun. And then obviously there's some color cast around her face. And so we're going to just kind of dive into this and make some adjustments and really make this image pop. This was shot with my 70-200. I believe it was at a 2.8 when I shot this. That's usually where I'm at when I'm working outside. Yeah, so let's go ahead and just dive into this. So I guess the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate my layer. And then we're going to come up here and I just want to kind of flatten it out just a little. Actually, scratch that. We will do that. So I'm going to come in here and we're going to go ahead and do a camera raw filter adjustment to kind of bring back some of these highlights that are in here. And like I said, almost kind of flatten it out a little bit, but just kind of balance the whole image as a whole. So we're going to do filter, camera raw filter. All right. And then we're going to bring down our highlights and even bring down the whites just a touch. And then I'm going to up my shadows. And then I'm going to up my blacks as well. And that will kind of get us to a pretty good place to start that's fairly balanced and it's not too contrasty in any one way. So I'm going to go ahead and press OK there. And when I'm doing this, I'm not really paying too much attention to these numbers. This just happens to be where I landed. But every image is going to be a little bit different. So your numbers will be different as well. It's kind of like a flavor to taste type of thing. Okay. So there we go. So, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and press Command J, and we're just going to come in here and we're going to clean up some of the areas on her face. So she's got fabulous skin, so we don't really need to do really a whole lot at all. But there are kind of like these darker areas right underneath her eyes that I would like to balance out just a bit. So this area underneath the eyes, everybody has a darker area under their eyes, and we don't necessarily want to eliminate it completely. We more so just want to kind of mask it off just a little bit so it doesn't look like it's quite as heavy and she doesn't look quite as tired. So I just grabbed my patch tool. So this is my patch tool. It's right over here in your toolbar. And then I'm just selecting an area and dragging it to an area that's a little bit more to my liking. So a little bit more of a healthier skin patch, not quite as dark, that sort of a thing. This works really great on hairs. It is a pretty great tool. Okay, and that looks pretty good right there. So let me kind of back out here. And that looks pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and merge these two top layers together. So Command E. So we highlighted both of those and we did a Command E. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we want to bring back her skin tone because obviously we're in the shadows. Actually, let's go ahead and clean up these cute little marker. She must have been drawing or something. Little marker patches on her fingers. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here with our quick select tool and we're going to select her face. Okay, and then what we're going to do, so because we have this awesome selection on her face, we can just come over here to our adjustment layers and I'm going to push my levels adjustment layer. And what that does is I know I've probably said this many times before if you've seen my videos, these level adjustment layers will pop up with a layer down here. And then you also have your adjustment panel to the side as well. And so what I'm going to do is I just want to this is our histogram for our levels. So you can tell the white point is way off. So we want to grab this white triangle here and drag it all the way over. And you can see that it gives us a more true level on her face, right? So our white points are true, the blacks are where they need to be, and then this midpoint falls right in the middle there. So that's about where we want it to be. What's great about working on that masking layer is you have this masking box on the levels adjustment. So when I come in here, I can actually grab a pretty heavy, soft round brush. So here's our brush. and it's just a soft round brush. And we're going to bring up our opacity quite a bit. So I'm going to be in the, we'll be in the 80s, I guess. So 80%, my flow, we're going to bring that up as well. It's at 68%. Again, the numbers aren't really a big factor right now, but what it is I'm just going to be able to take that, because it's on this masking layer, I can just bring this in and just brush it everywhere I want it to be, right? So we did it to her skin, and then we can come around here and we can just brush it on her hair, basically anywhere that we need it to be, have a little bit more pop to it. So you do have to be a little bit careful when you're brushing it around the edges. So you can kind of see it can create a little bit of that haloing. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, and then we can actually come in here and go back down to this layer, use our quick select tool, and we can come in here and we can just select certain parts that we maybe want this level adjustment to only recognize. Okay, so about like that. So then we just go back up to our levels adjustment layer, come back and grab our soft round brush, and we can brush that on where we want it. And it recognizes those edges, and it won't go beyond those. So you won't see any weird haloing effects. So that does look like it's maybe just a little bit too much for the dress itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring down the opacity quite a bit and bring down the flow. And then we're just going to brush that on in smaller amounts right where on the dress. Because the levels, the value of the levels is going to be a little bit different than her actual skin, because it's a different tone. I'm going to deselect that. So you do have to be careful, like I said before, about how you're brushing it and where you're brushing it, so you don't get too carried away with, or it doesn't blow out the highlights in certain parts of, in this case, the dress. And then we can come down here and we can just kind of dabble it in this area with the flowers. And I'm going to make it a low opacity again, and I'm going to press the X, and it's going to toggle back and forth because it's looking just a little bit too bright right in this area. So I'm going to bring that back down just a bit. And then if you press the X, it does toggle back and forth. So if I press the X again, it's going to go back to the white brush, and I can just dabble that on where I want it again. So I will go ahead and I'm going to use this to brighten up some of the area behind her as well, just to kind of help give us a nice pretty glow of light behind her. And I am still at about 37%. With my flow is at 40%. And I'm just kind of brightening up the background just a tiny bit. And then I might come back down here. This spot down here is still looking just a little bit too blown out. So I'm going to use my black brush again to kind of bring that back. And I think that's more so just like the sun hitting right there. So we can always kind of mask that out a little bit later. But let's go back to our white brush. And I'm going to brush it on her skin right here by her leg. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. We'll come back and we'll do some adjusting on certain areas, but so here you can kind of see the difference, how it just really made her pop and made her stand out a little bit more. Then you can actually come back to your levels, and if anything got a little bit out of hand, so you can kind of see where that levels point went down a little bit, and we can kind of bring it back just a little. Because what it's doing is it's reading those parts of that dress, but that looks pretty good to me right there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to merge that down, so Command E. And then we're going to go in here and let's do some retouching of the skin. Well, more so some smoothing. So this is kind of what I call a brush on frequency separation. So I'm going to push Command J, and we're going to do, and what this does is, so what I'm looking at, I guess here, is, so it's kind of blotchy right in here, right underneath the eyes, that sort of thing. And I just want to balance out the skin. And I do this for any subject, even if they happen to have really great skin. She really does, but I use this on everybody. So I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to do vivid light, and then we're going to push Command or Control I to invert that. Then we're going to do filter other, high pass. And what we're going to do with this high pass adjustment is what I'm looking for is like these larger surfaces of the skin. So right around the cheeks, I want to blur it enough to where those tones in her skin, they look almost like they're kind of melted together. So about right there, actually might bring it down a little bit. So about right there looks about what I'm looking for. So I'm going to press OK. And then we're going to do filter, blur, and we're going to do Gaussian blur. And what we're doing is we're looking to bring back those details while still maintaining that smooth look to the skin. So about right there looks good to me. So you can tell that she still has freckles. There's details there, but at the same time, her skin looks nice and smooth. So I'm going to press OK. Then we're going to add a masking box to that. I'm going to push Command or Control I to invert it. Now all we need to do is just come over here and we're going to grab a soft round brush. We're going to bring up our opacity. So I usually have it at about 80% or so, and then my flow is about 40%. And the reason I'm okay with having it at a pretty heavy opacity is because I made that adjustment specifically to her skin. So we really can't brush on too much of it. It'll only go as far as what I adjusted it for. So I can go on at 100% if I wanted to too, and it's not going to overdo it because we made this specifically for her skin. And then I will also brush it on the skin of like the hands and the arms and really any larger surfaces of skin that are showing. So that looks pretty good to me. And you can kind of see the difference when I click it off and on. And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down. So now we need to kind of come in here and start doing a little bit of color correcting. Her skin is, because she was in shadows, it is pretty gray. So what we need to do is fix that up just a little bit. So it's not crazy horrible, but it definitely needs it needs a little bit of love. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a circle here just around her eye. Currently it is feathered. Actually, let's do a zero feathered effect just so you can kind of see the intensity of it. Okay, so I just did a circle. And what we're going to do to adjust the color of her skin is we are going to come in here and we're going to do a selective color adjustment layer. So we're going to push selective color, and then it pops up with our layer here. And then here's our adjustment panel. And so we are currently in the neutrals, but you have a whole bunch of colors that we can work with. So the big thing with Photoshop is if you know how to use your tools, you can do anything with this. I know what selected color does, so I use this for quite a few things. So anything from skin adjustment to eye color adjustments to dress changes, all sorts of stuff. But the more you know your tools in Photoshop, the more you know what you can do. Okay, so you have all of these colors to adjust in selective color, and currently we're on the neutrals, and neutrals tends to pack the most punch, so you've got to be careful with it, but it is helpful at the same time. So we're going to take out some cyans, and we're going to add a little bit of yellow to that, and then we're going to take out some blacks, and you can kind of see what it's doing to her skin. So we're going to take out some cyans, and I actually think that I really like that color. We might bring it up a little bit more. There we go. So there we go. So you can see that circle that I had there. So again, all we have to do, because we're on this adjustment layer, is come over here to get a nice soft round brush. Again, it's one of those things, we adjusted it specifically for her skin, so we can have a nice heavy brush and we can just brush this everywhere we want it. And we can brush this on her hair too, because she has a nice warm brown tone, so it's okay to put that warmth back in there. And then even on her dress, because we warmed it up, it's all a warming effect, and her dress was kind of like this buttercream type yellow color, so we're okay with brushing it on there. There we go. All right. Okay. So that's looking pretty good. We'll still go in and we'll do a little bit more to pink up her cheeks and her lips and different things. But for now, I think that that looks pretty good. It's a really good warming effect. And actually, because we only did the neutrals, what we can do too is we can actually go back and we have it all nice and colored in everywhere we want it. So we can actually go to our yellows and we can take some of the cyans out of the yellows. And then we can go into our reds as well. And same thing, take some cyans out of the reds. And this is just going to bring a little bit more of that color back into her skin. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to merge that down. Now there are some adjustments that we need to do to her eyes. They're looking kind of greeny in the whites, and so we want to kind of reduce that color. In this case, I think I'm going to start by taking a little bit of the hue saturation out of it. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bring out that saturation. And then I might see about adding a little bit more blue to it. Maybe we'll just leave it at 0. We'll just leave it at 0 for now, but we are going to go ahead and bring a little bit of the hue saturation out. Now I don't want it to desaturate the whole image. I'm more so just looking at the whites of the eyes. So I'm going to invert that. And I'm just going to use my soft round brush. Oops. And we're going to just brush some of that greeny colors and stuff out of the whites of her eyes. And it's just slight, but that's okay. It looks pretty good. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to focus on bringing out that beautiful blue tone that's in her eyes, in the actual iris of her eyes. And so in this case, I'm going to use my color balance adjustment layer. So same thing, adjustment layer, here's our layer, here's our adjustment panel. So when you're working with color balance, you can just shift your sliders one way or the other. And so I'm going to add some in my midtones. So you have the highlights, midtones, and shadows. Okay, so right now we're in the midtones. And I'm just looking more so at the eye while I'm doing this. So I'm not too worried about the rest of the image, but I'm just kind of looking at her eye. So a little bit of cyan, a little bit more blue. And then we'll go into our shadows and do a little bit of that as well. And that looks pretty good overall. So we're going to invert it so we can't see it. So Command I. And then we're going to come over here and do the same thing. Grab a soft, round, white brush to brush that on. And that helps the color in the whites of the eyes as well. And there we go, makes a big difference. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and we'll merge that down. So Command E, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to start to adjust the background just a bit. That doesn't mean we're completely done with her face. We definitely will come back to it and adjust it some more. But I want to kind of start bringing in the scene a little bit more as well. So what we're going to do is I feel like the greens are maybe just a little bit they're almost too cyan and almost have like a little bit like neon-y colors to them. So I'm going to come over here to my select of a color. And then I'm going to go into our yellows, and I'm going to bring out, I'm going to add some cyan to it. I'm going to add a bit more black. There we go. And then I'm going to go into my greens. And same thing, I'm going to add a little bit more black. And I just want to deepen that background just a touch. Okay, so I'm going to invert that, so Command I. And then what we can do is come down here to our main layer, and then we're going to do a quick select, and we're going to do select subject. So the quick select tool, select subject right here at the top. And what Photoshop does is it does a pretty good job of recognizing your subject, and it pulls them out and has this cutout. Now there are going to be some things that you probably need to fix, but I'm not too worried about these hard lines at the moment, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in and we're going to dabble around it and kind of bring back that color a little bit more. So we have this. And what we're going to do is we're going to do select, because we select our subject, but we really wanted only to affect the background. So we did select subject. So we have our subject selected, but now what we want to do is go select and inverse. And now that selection is focusing on the background. So what we can do is just come over here with a big white brush, and it's going to be again at the high opacity, because we did this adjustment specifically for the background. And then I can just come in here and brush this on. So because we have that selection around her, it's not going to affect her. It's just going to, you know, get the outer parts of the selection. And there we go. So we just toned down that hot yellow color that's back there. It's just was looking a little bit too neon-y. Again, it's one of those things we'll probably come back and adjust a little bit more as well. But at least we have that in place, and we're doing pretty good. And I might use that brush to brush in here too. It's just looking a little bit bright in this little spot here. And that looks good. Okay. So then I can merge that down, and there we go. Okay. So, oops, go back. Just this layer. So merge that down. Okay, so we're doing pretty good. So here's kind of where we started, and here's where we're at. So we're moving along. Okay, so now what we want to do is I want to come in here, and we're going to start maybe do a little bit of dodge and burn, but I think I want to brighten up her, let's see, what do I want to do next? You know, I think I want to brown up her hair just a little bit more. It's kind of looking a little bluey, kind of ashy a little bit. So let's add a little bit of color to it. So I'm going to come over here to my selective color once again, and I'm going to go into my neutrals, and I'm going to bring out the cyans, the neutrals. I might deepen those just a little. And then we want to go into the reds because it's pulling really red. Add a little bit of cyan, add a little bit of yellow, and a little bit more yellow. We might deepen that a little bit. And that's looking like a much warmer brown. So I'm going to invert that, and then we can just come in here again with a heavy soft round brush, and we can brush that warm brown tone into her hair. And these adjustments don't have to be anything too major. They can be, I mean, they're fairly small adjustments, but they definitely make an impact in the overall look of the image. And there we go. You can see the warmth of her hair changed quite a bit. Okay. So I'm going to merge that layer down. So we're doing really good there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and let's do a little bit of dodge and burn just to kind of get us started on that. At some point I'm going to bring in some light rays as well. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of dodge and burn. So to do dodge and burn, I can do this a couple of different ways. And then in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my layer twice. And we're going to change this top layer to multiply. Okay, so multiply is to darken. You can kind of see that. I'm going to add a masking box, and I'm going to push Command I to invert so that we can't see it or make it invisible. So there's our burn layer. Okay, and then this layer we're going to change to screen. So screen is for our lightning. So we're going to add a masking box to that. Push Command or Control I to invert it, and then we're going to go ahead and label that one as dodge. And what I like to do is I like to group these together. So I'll highlight the both and push Command G, and it puts it into a group, and it makes things pretty nice and easy. And they're all just kind of like in that one spot. So if we wanted to, we can open this up and we can just click this off and on, and it'll show us exactly what we did to the image. So I'm going to start with my dodge. And usually when I do this, I'm usually at about like 21%. And then for opacity and for my flow, I use it, bring it down to about 10 or 11%. And so again, this is the dodge. So it's going to dodge light, which would essentially make it darker, right? So if you're dodging something, it's going to brighten something up, okay? So I usually start right underneath the brow bone, and then I go right down the center of the eye. And really what I'm doing is I'm just kind of following the natural highlights of the face. So right here across the cheekbone would be a highlight. Down the nose, across the middle of the eyebrows is usually, I like to brighten that up just a little bit as well. And then I'll come back over here, right above the brow, right down the middle of the eye. And then I'll go down the middle, the center of the lips, right down onto the chin, and usually along the jawline there, and right on the top of this cheekbone as well. And then really it's all about following those natural highlights that you see there. So for instance, we'll come in here and we'll highlight this strand of hair right on top of her head. And we're going to come back in, we're going to paint this up a little bit too. I like to do the Cupid's bow right here a little bit as well, but you can see where those highlights are naturally, and then I like to come in here and I'll highlight the dress as well. Okay, all right. So I'm going to click that off and on so you can kind of see exactly where we put those highlights. It makes a nice difference there. So now we're going to go into the burn layer there, and then we're going to just see, it's basically we're doing the opposite. So we're going to hover in all of those natural shadows that are there. So right underneath the cheekbones. And all these natural shadows. So right in here in the different creases of the hair. I like to come in here and just kind of contour these shadows where the eye starts to fold. I'll come in here and I will darken up the lashes. And I'll go down the middle of the Cupid's bow right there and underneath the lip. And I usually do underneath the lip just a little bit as well, just to kind of give it like that pouty look. And then just in all of these nice shadows and creases that are on the dress, just to give it a little bit more depth. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this off and on so you can kind of see the pretty decent difference between, you know, with or without the dodge and burn on it. So we may come back and do a little bit more too, just to make it stand out a little bit. But that looks pretty good to me right there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to blur that down, merge that down. But what I am going to do is I'm going to add a slight blur to the background of this. Just for fun, because just to give it a little bit more of a dramatic effect to it, I guess, overall. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and we're going to duplicate this layer again. So this top layer, what we need to do is we're going to, I don't know if you've ever blurred a subject and then tried to cut them out and then seen this like weird blurred halo around the edge of them. Well, I'm going to show you how to avoid that. So we're going to do a filter, liquefy. And so essentially what we need to do, if we're going to go ahead and blur the background a little bit, we need to create a layer where she is essentially pushed inside of herself, or the subject is in general, just so that when we go and we do decide to blur the background, she is essentially out of the way, and we're not going to have this weird blurred halo getting in the way of our selection. So about like that. I know it looks totally crazy, but that's okay. So we're going to do a filter, blur gallery, and we're going to do a tilt shift blur. So you can do a field blur. This tilt shift blur is fantastic because you can set your anchor point where you want it to be. So we're just going to move this, and essentially where you want it to be is going to be, so the line between the two solid lines, and it's taking a little bit of a time for us. So the area between the two solid lines is where the focus happens, right? It's all in focus. And then the area between the solid to the dotted line is it gets a little bit blurred, and then the majority of the blur happens beyond the dotted line. So if we bring this up, you can kind of see that background is nice and blurred a little bit more. And there we go. That looks pretty good. So I just did it just enough to kind of give it a little bit more interest. I'm gonna go ahead and press OK. And there we go. Okay, so now we can turn that off, and then we can come over here and say select subject. So a quick select tool, select subject, and Photoshop's going to do its job and pick out, you know, all of the pieces of the subject there. I just want to make sure I come in here and get these extra little bits that it didn't get, so that we don't have any weird spots on her. So if I do this, you can see how far we pushed the subject inside of itself so that that stays out of the way. So now what we can do is we can come up to this layer. We can come down here and press this white box with the black dot, and that is our masking box. And we can push Command or Control I to invert it. And there we go. So now we have a nice creamy, smooth backdrop, just a little bit extra blur to it. And then the subject stands out really nice and pretty. So now what I need to do is we're going to go ahead and come over here to this masking box, and I want to bring back a little bit of those details around the edge just so it doesn't look like she's a complete sticker cutout. So I'm going to up my opacity to about 50%, and what we're going to do is we're just going to take a soft round brush on black, and then all we have to do is tap around those areas that we want to make sure that we remove a little bit of that blur from. So right around her edge, reveal some of those hairs there. Make sure it has some nice life to it. And we'll just kind of tap around. And you can kind of see the difference there. It looks pretty good. Okay, So now what we want to do is we want to start kind of bringing in some haze and some light, and then we'll paint it. But let's go ahead and start. Let's bring in a little bit of a, I'm going to do a halo, or excuse me, let's see here. Let me open it up. I have these light rays in the shop and I love them because they're so helpful. So let me go ahead and I'm going to pull up some light rays here. Okay, so Photoshop is going to open up these light rays. So I created these light rays specifically for situations like this, where I want a little bit of a light leak coming in, but I don't want to take the time to fully recreate one. So I'm going to go ahead and just use these ones that I've already recreated myself. So let's do that. We're going to drag this into our scene. So this is the opposite of what I wanted to do. So all we have to do is do edit, transform, and we're going to flip horizontal. There we go. And so now we have that beautiful light coming in from camera right there. So I'm going to bring that down and it looks like it's going in the right direction. So when you're dealing with a layer like this, I know you're probably like, ah, it's black. What you want to do is you want to change the blending mode to screen, and you can see it kind of makes it transparent. And then you just have your light leak where you want it. So now what we need to do is we need to come back down to our layer with our subject, and I want to select her. We could do select subject again if you wanted to as well, but this is a quick select. You can just come in here and grab your subject that way, and then I can come in here back to my layer, and I can add a masking box to that. It's the opposite of what I want, so I can push Command or Control I, and you can see that it cuts her out nicely so that she is she doesn't have that light leak falling on her because essentially the light's behind her. And so it wouldn't necessarily be wrapping around her face. So there's this hard line here. So I'm just going to come in with a black brush and we'll just make sure that we remove that hard line at the edge. And then if you wanted to bring down the opacity, so if it was, for instance, too intense, you can definitely do that as well. So let me see if I like the other light ray better though. Let's drag this guy. He's a little bit less orange. You can shift the colors on those if you would like to, but let's see where this puts us. And I think I do like that a little bit better. So I'm going to ditch this one. I'm just going to delete that layer. And I can come in here with this guy. And you can push Command or Control T and shift them any way you'd like. So if you need it to the light to be coming in a little bit more at an angle, you can definitely do that as well. So I'm going to do this. And what this light is meant to do is to essentially mimic the sunlight kind of coming in through the leaves. This particular light ray is maybe just a little bit too, the lines are a little bit hard, so we're going to blur it a little bit. So we're going to do Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we're just going to soften it up just a touch. So about like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then I am going to bring down the opacity. There we go. And then we can do quick select, select subject. There we go. And then we're just going to add our masking box to that. Command I to invert it. And then we're doing pretty good. So I might bring down that opacity just a little bit more so we have that nice soft rays of light. Then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to merge that down. That looks pretty good. So there's definitely still some things that we need to do to her skin. So I'm seeing some green / orange color casts kind of happening in here. So I want to make sure that we take care of those. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to do a new layer. Let's do a new blank layer. So we're going to just do a new layer. And I'm going to come in here and let's just see if we can get this to do what I want it to. So I'm just going to pick a nice pretty color that is a nice healthy skin tone. I'm not seeing a whole lot of, you know, difference in like grays or greens or oranges. So that looks actually pretty good to me. So I'm going to press OK. We're going to make this, we're going to do our brush and we're going to have the brush as color. And so we have a nice healthy color skin color. And so we're going to just come in here with our brush and start to brush that on in the areas where we think we need it, the skin to be a little bit more of that color that we want it to be. So what we're doing is we're just brushing that healthy skin color on. And so it's kind of taking out that orangey tones or the greeny tones and replacing it with more of this healthy skin tone color that we were wanting. It might be just a little bit tricky to see at the moment, but I'm going to turn that brush or turn that layer off and on so we can kind of get a better look at it. And I'm actually going to, let's do this a different way. So I'm going to delete that layer. Let's do it different. So we're going to do a new layer, but the layer itself is going to be on color. And let's do this differently. Okay. This will work a little bit better, I believe. There we go. So same thing. It's just kind of getting rid of those tones that we don't necessarily want. So those greens and those orangey tones, and it's just going to brighten that up a little bit. So it's more of a healthy, natural skin tone color. And if you need to, you can pick different colors in here. So right there. Paint some nice pink color on her lips. So I just picked a color from her lip to pink up the lips a little bit more. And I might actually use that same color to kind of pinken up her cheeks. Good. It is a little bit harder to see, but it is working. So let me go back. I might up the opacity of my brush just a little bit more as well. I'm gonna come back in here and pick a nice healthy skin tone color and use that to do a little bit more brushing on. I know it is probably pretty tricky to see. When it comes to color casts and picking out color casts that are under the shadows of the skin and stuff like that, it seems like it's just a minor adjustment, but it really does make a huge difference in the overall look of your subject, especially when you have like these crazy green color casts bouncing up, you know, during a bright day. Yes, it looks really good. So I'm looking right here underneath her brow bone. It looks, I mean, it's a huge difference. It looks really pretty. Okay, nice and soft. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down, and that looks pretty good. So at this point, I want to add a little bit more brightness to color pop to the whole image. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a channel mixer, and that is going to add vibrancy to the whole image. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back down. We're going to come down to this circle that's like a half black, half white circle, and we're going to come in here and we're going to choose channel mixer. And so you'll have a layer here pop up, and you have this panel pop up, your adjustment panel. So we're going to start with our reds. And if we're on the reds, okay, then you want to come down here to your reds and do 120 plus 120. And then every other color is going to be -10. Okay, so then you're going to come up here to your greens. So if you're on your green's going to be plus 120. And then every other color is going to be -10. Okay, so same thing with your blues. So the blues will be 120, and then the reds will be -10, and the greens will be -10. Okay, so you can see it just made everything fairly intense. So I like it on the background more than I like it on her specifically. I am going to bring down the opacity just a bit, So about, I would probably say about 70%. Actually, that's 65% works for me. I'm going to come over here to this masking box and we're going to choose a soft round brush, and I'm going to come in here to around 30% opacity, and I want to make sure I'm brushing that off of certain areas that I don't want a ton of saturated color. And so right here in the shadows by her eyes that we just kind of spent all that time getting rid of those color casts, I want to make sure that I'm taking those off of there. A lot of times if you have really intense color by the eyes, they can look almost a little sickly, and so I want to make sure that we're kind of bringing out that saturation that's there while still leaving a lot of nice pretty color in the skin. That looks pretty great. You can see how much vibrancy it added to the image. It's really pretty. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down, and we're going to do a new layer, and we're going to pop the color in her eyes just a touch. She's just got the most beautiful eyes. So we're going to use a white brush, a soft round white brush. We're about 34%, which should be fine. You can always bring it down a little bit lower, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a crescent shape right here in the bottom part of her eyes, right in the iris. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay. So this particular adjustment can look extra intense on bright colored eyes or light colored eyes. So I can bring down the opacity, but still maintain that little bit of pop that's right there in the eyes. Good. All right, so I'm going to merge that down. Looking pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do is, I think that I might come in here and do, let's see, I might come in here and do just a little bit more dodge and burn. Let's do that. So I'm going to push Command J. Actually, let's do this. We'll do the other dodge and burn. So this is a great way to learn both dodge and burns, I guess. Well, there's so many different ways to do dodge and burn, but here's the second way. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer, and we're going to use the history brush to do this. And so we're going to come over here. We're going to press. So here's your history panel. If for whatever reason you don't see the history panel, you can come up here to your window and you can just click on your history panel right there, and it'll pop up somewhere within Photoshop. So here's our duplicate layer. So we want to make sure we click on this last history state here. Then we can come over here and grab our history brush. So right now, so I've used this before, obviously, it's on multiply. So multiply, once again, is going to darken, and screen is going to lighten. So I'm okay with doing the multiply first in this case. And I'm just going to use this to darken the lashes right under here, that little shadow that happens right underneath the lashes as well. A little bit in the corners of her eyes, just so they stand out and they're nice and pretty. And sometimes I'll touch up that nice dark pupil. Let's zoom in. Okay, so same thing. We're going to use the history brush, and we're on multiply, and we can come in here and darken up right underneath the lashes and right on that lash line and right into the pupil. And then we can do kind of the same thing we did before, right in the corners of the lips, right underneath the pouty part of the lips, down the Cupid's bow. Sometimes I'll dab right here on the inner part of the eyelids as well. And then we can use it to shape the face a little bit more as well. Let me back out since we're going to do a little bit more shaping of the face. Let's go in here, and we might come in here too, and I'm going to up my opacity quite a bit. So let's bring it up to about 27%. And we're just going to come in here and start to deepen up some of these ridges and creases that are in the dress, just to give it a little bit more definition, a little bit more pop to the image, so she stands out the most. So again, just kind of following those shadows that are there. And then we're going to change our blending mode of the brush to screen. And once again, that's where we're going to use this for to highlight. And I'm going to bring it back down to about 15%. 14% works. So right underneath the brow bone, and then down the eyes, across the cheekbones, right in between the brows. On the lips, down the Cupid's bow. Across the chin, and then on the other cheekbone here. And then right underneath the other brow bone and down the eyes. Do the highlights of the hair. And I'm actually going to up this opacity quite a bit because I want to bring out those highlights really well, just so it makes her hair look nice and shiny, especially when we go in and we start to paint her hair a little bit. Good. Okay, so it looks good, and I'm going to merge that down, and we're doing pretty good. So one thing I want to do too is I want to kind of create a little bit more of this look of like these flowers in the front, this beautiful purple color. I do think that I want to change the color of those purple flowers just a little bit more. They're looking a little bluey gray, I guess. And we want to make those a little bit brighter. So we're going to come up here, we're going to do select color range. And I want to come in here and start kind of selecting some of these colors that are in it. Bring down our fuzziness. Press OK. And I want to come in here and I want to make sure I'm going to use my lasso tool, and I'm going to hold Option because I want to make sure that she is not going to be affected by this. We'll leave her flower. Okay, so now we have all of these selections. We've got to get that out of her eye as well. And we're doing pretty good. So now what we can do is we have this nice selection here. And so we can come over here and we can change that. So what we can do is we can do a color balance. And we can add a little bit magenta, maybe a little bit more red. And that's in the midtones. So now we can go into our highlights and do the same thing. A bit more magenta, a little bit more red. And you can see the difference. So it really brought out those pinks and those flowers. And that was just in the color range. Okay, so merge that down. All right, so now what we can do is we can start to add a few more of these flowers in the front, but give it kind of more of that depth of field perspective. So I'm going to do a new layer. And we can come in here and I'm going to pick, I'm going to do a radial gradient. So we're going to do our gradient tool. And we want to make sure that it's transitioning from the color that we choose to this checker box pattern. Okay. And the checker box represents transparency. So we can come in here, pick a color, press OK. And we can just come in here and start to do some of these radial gradients. So about right there. And then maybe we'll come over here, pick this color, do one right here. Maybe pick a softer purple. And we can just kind of do little dabs of color here and there. I might come in and grab a slightly darker shade. Oops. And then we can bring down the opacity. And then we can do a new layer and do it again. And also bring down that opacity. And that looks pretty good. I might change that just a touch. Bring it down. Actually, let's bring down that opacity just a little bit more. And that makes it look a little bit more like a little bit of a shoot through with the flowers and stuff. So I like it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to kind of give us a nice pretty vignette to work with. So I'm going to leave those in a group. So Command G, I'm going to put those flowers in a group, and I'm going to turn that off for just a minute. Let's duplicate this layer, so Command J, and I think I want to add a little bit of a color to the background a little bit more. Let's play with this and see. I don't know if I've really done this too much before, but I know what this effect will do, so I think it'll work. So let's try it, and let's see if it works for what we want it to be. Okay, so we duplicated our layer, and I'm going to come down here to this little button that says Effects, and I am going to do a color overlay, and I'm going to pick a nice kind of gray-green to work with. Press OK. So right now it's on soft light, which I think I actually really like. Let me see. Let's see what overlay looks like. Overlay is going to be not too bad. It's a little bit more moody. And then if we went to multiply, that obviously is going to make it really nice and dark. And kind of moody as well. I think I liked it. I think I liked it on overlay. Let's start there. Okay. So now what we can do is we can come down here and we can do select subject, quick select subject, and it's going to pull her out once again. And then we can just add a masking box to that, invert it, and you can see it kind of makes that background just a little bit more moody. I'm going to bring down the opacity. Do I like it? Let me back out here just a little bit. I think I do. Okay. And then I'm going to take a soft round brush with black, and I'm just going to come in here and dabble around. So we can take it off of these flowers in the foreground. I'm going to up my opacity and just dab it around our subject. Okay, and then I'm going to come up, I'm going to turn on those flowers again just to kind of see where that puts us. And that looks pretty good. All right, I like where it's at. So I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to merge these layers down all together again. There we go. So now I'm going to start doing some painting. I always feel like painting does this little nice smooth finishing effect for me. So I always really like the way it looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. I'm using Richard's hairbrush, and actually it's basically, or it is the same thing, is if you come into his wildlife brushes as well, and there is which one is it? Where is my hairbrush? I usually use the one from the other series, but I know it's in here as well. Hairbrush B3. There we go. So what we're doing is we're using this as a mixer brush. So we need to come over here, change our brush to a mixer brush, and we can come back down here to the brush. Sometimes you have to go back and forth and change your mixer brush to a mixer brush, but sometimes it defaults to it. So if you don't see your mixer brush, you can come over here and look for it in your tool panel. So what we're doing is again, this is a mixer brush. So if you think about having two blots of paint, so like you have the red paint and then you have the blue paint, and they're right next to each other. And you just take your dry finger and you drag it through from the red to the blue, right to left. It's going to drag that color, and then you just kind of like let it drag off into the dry paper as well. And then that's essentially what you're doing with the mixer brush. We're not adding any color. We're just taking the mixer brush and we're just dragging these colors through themselves. So with the hair, and this is Richard from Stir Da Vinci Art Tools, and he is a good friend of mine and has the most amazing brushes. So they are pretty fantastic, and I use all of them. So this is from his wildlife brush set, and this is the hairbrush, so the B3 hairbrush. And it says wildlife hairbrush, and there's a lot of fantastic hairbrushes in there that I use for different critters and compositing and stuff like that. But I love this for my subjects, especially with kids. You can get their hair gets so like wind tossed and can look a little bit ratty sometimes. But this will kind of help smooth everything out and make it look nice. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of following the natural lines of the hair. So if you notice the hair goes, from the top of her head down, that's how I'm following my brush. I'm not going side to side. I'm just dragging with the same directions that the hair is falling. And I thought I wanted to kind of comb through that with the brush, but I don't think so. I think I'm going to go and erase it. Okay. Okay, so then I'm going to come down here to this layer, and I'm going to, oh, we brushed through it. That's okay. So I merged those layers, and that's why you keep your layers open. There we go. I still have it. So what we want to do is we're going to have to kind of come back to that. Here's our layer. And we are going to have to paint the hair again, unless we want to keep those layers. So we duplicate our layer. So same thing. We're going to brush through here again. You get to see it again. It's exciting. But I do enjoy painting. It is actually a lot of fun. It was actually probably one of my most enjoyable parts to my editing. I could paint forever. So again, we're just going to go follow the shapes of the hair. So if you didn't catch what I did before, I accidentally merged down all of the layers. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that when we're painting, we are on its own separate layer so that I can reduce the opacity. So what I want is I don't want this to necessarily look like a painting. I want this to look photorealistic. And so by reducing the opacity on that layer, it will give me that effect. And so that's why I backed up, and we're doing this again so that I can come in there and change the opacity of that paint layer, which is actually what we're going to do right now. Okay, so it looks nice and smooth and pretty. So then we can come in here and change the opacity. And there we go. So it looks nice and smooth, and I might bring it up just a touch in the 60s. And that looks really good. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down. And then we're going to duplicate that layer again, so Command J. And I'm in this time I'm going to use the Splatter 59 brush. And we're going to brush through, ooh, we need to make sure we're on a mixer brush. So the mixer brush, and we'll go down to our Splatter 59 brush. And we're just going to, again, follow through in the same direction that the fabric is flowing, just like we did with the hair. There we go. So then we can just bring down the opacity on this one as well. And it just gives us a nice, smooth look to the fabric. Okay, so I'm going to merge those down. And we are looking pretty good. Okay, so what I need to do now is I want to come in here and I want to pop the sparkles in her eye. So sometimes I come here with levels adjustment and I'll, you know, add a little bit of sparkle. I think in this case, what I'm going to do is I might actually draw some. So a lot of times what I'll do is I will actually come in here and I'll just kind of almost create my own catch lights. And so I just use a regular brush. I'm going to use a soft round brush, and I upped my opacity and I upped my flow to 100%. And I have a new layer, so it's kind of by itself. And then I'm going to come in here with a small brush, and I'm just going to follow. Oh, we don't want pink. We want white. And I'm just going to follow those highlights, but I'm not going to just block them all out. I'll just do certain parts of the highlights. Same thing here. And those are just kind of some natural sparkles in the eyes. And then I'll actually even come in here and touch up the waterline as well. And some of these sparkles on the inner part of the eyes. And it just makes them look a little bit more glassy overall. And it looks really pretty. Gorgeous. Okay, so I'm going to merge that down. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab, I thought I wanted to keep this hair, at least I would brush through it, but I really don't want to. So I'm going to use my clone stamp, and I'm just going to clone little pieces and bring it down. Okay. And I just want to check my levels one more time here. Oh, look at that. They look great. So the whites are as bright as they need to be, and my midpoints are right in the middle there. We're doing pretty great here. So let me see. I guess we can delete that. And I think that's about it. Let's do one more round of painting on her hair. So I'm going to duplicate my layer, and we're going to come in here. We're going to grab the B3 brush. We want to make sure we're on a mixer brush, and we're going to go with the B3 brush, and excuse me, yeah, B3 1. And we're just going to brush this down just a little bit more again, just in some of this areas that I think maybe you could use a little bit more smoothing. That looks good. Okay. I might do just one more vignette, but let me see if I like it even. So let's, if I'm going to darken the background, sometimes what I'll do is I'll come in here and I will do a exposure adjustment layer, and I'll come down here and I'll adjust the gamma. And then you can come over here with a radial gradient and choose the one that's transitioning from black to white. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start right by the subject's face, and I'll brush it off, and it kind of, you can see where the black dot is, and it starts there, and it creates this gradation that kind of goes off the page here, or excuse me, goes outward from the subject's face. So now what I'm going to do is I come in here and grab a regular soft round brush, and I'm going to bring down my flow. I'm going to bring down my opacity, both around the 50% point. And I just want to make sure that I'm kind of brushing it off of her and a little bit behind her. And then right over here where this natural light should be kind of flowing in from. Oh, we got rid of our flowers. We want to fix that. There we go. So we just have a darker rim mostly to the background. So we deleted our flowers in my mishap with the painting. So let's go ahead and fix that again. So we're going to do a new layer, and we're going to do a radial gradient. And we want to make sure we're transitioning from the color to a black to white. And then we're just going to come in here and pick some colors. Okay, so bring down that opacity. And we'll do one more. And we'll bring down the opacity. And then we'll put those into their group. And let's turn that off and on so you can kind of see the difference. And I just feel like it kind of ties the whole image together. There we go. All right. And I think that is pretty much where I would stop in this case. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to merge this down to this one, and I'll show you the before and after, even though I've shown you a little bit. Okay, so here is the after, and then here's the before. So we definitely came quite a long ways. And the after. And there we go. So I'm going to merge that down and we're good to go. So if you guys have any questions, I hope this helped you. I hope to help a lot of people who do natural light photography kind of work through some of the troubles that they have when they're doing their edits. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great day. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to our support. But also please feel free to share your images in the Shannon Squires Creative Academy group. We would love to see how everything's going for you. So have a good day. Talk to you later, guys.